As a business owner, there is some level of when you leverage yourself a little bit and you remove the safety net and you give yourself, as they say, kind of burn the ships. That drives me to succeed. And I think that there's some level of expanding into these new markets. You got to hustle it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pence. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
Awesome. Today on the pod, we have Nick Muzzatti. He is an awesome dude. I've known him for several years now. So Nick, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your company, Snap Entertainment. What is it and what do you guys do?
Snap Entertainment, we provide arcade game rentals and photo booth rentals, primarily in the DMV, that's DC, Maryland, and Virginia, mostly to higher end corporate and social events. So I like to tell people, give them an easy way to think of it is if you ever walk into a Dave & Buster's or a main event, all those games you see set up there are the kinds of things that we bring to events. Skee ball lanes, basketball games, all your classic arcade games, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, claw machines are really popular. So really anything fun like that, if it makes events fun, that's what we provide.
Interesting. So you do also like bar mitzvahs to like corporate retreat or something like that?
We always say, Saturdays are for bar and bat mitzvahs. We've been doing those for years. There's a very large Jewish population in the DMV, and there's also a lot of wealthier families who, will throw these really large, extravagant events. And different from a wedding where you have, florals and catering and your band. At a bar and bat mitzvah, you really want to have something fun for the kids. So they'll bring our games in. So we say Saturdays are for bar and bat mitzvahs. Monday through Friday is corporate. So, every company coming into the DC area looking to do their convention, whether it's at the convention center or the Gaylord or surrounding hotels, they will typically have some sort of fun evening for their attendees. And so they'll bring us in. And then, in between all that is, any company that's doing their company party, their holiday party, they'll bring us in for entertainment. So it's a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. Okay. So give us some of the background, like the numbers around the business, like where is it revenue-wise employee, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So just this past year in 23, we did about 1.2 million in revenue. We had been trying to crack that $1 million mark for quite a few years, actually leading up to the pandemic. And then, of course, that hit, that threw us off course. That's a whole topic right there that we can get into. But when we did come out of the pandemic in 2022, we had one of our best years ever, or our best year to date. And we finally cracked that $1 million in revenue, which was really exciting. That was a milestone that we had been aiming for many years. And then last year we did about 1.2, and we're looking for the same kind of steady growth this year. This year, actually, we're trending a little higher. Last time I looked, we're up about 40% right now, which is really great. So we'd like to hit 1.5, but I always say I have a secret goal, the one that I just kind of keep in my head. And so that's around 1.7. And then we have myself as, full-time employee and 4 others that are full-time on staff. And then lots of seasonal and part-time staff that help us out on the weekends or at events. That was a big leap for us. Our company for many years was just myself and one other full-time person prior to the pandemic. And coming out of the pandemic, we grew really fast from basically half of 2021 and then 2022 and 2023. And we grew really fast. So we've gone from, a 3,000 square foot warehouse to just over 7,100 square feet now. And it went from 0 trucks during the pandemic to 3 trucks that we own and just lots and lots of equipment. It's a pretty asset heavy business.
So I was going to ask about that. So the capital or like the structure of the business is obviously you've got some labor in there, right? So you're 1.2 at 5 employees. That's about normal. So I'd say that's probably a 50%, around 50-60% gross margin business after labor, something like that.
I did those numbers, thinking about what you might ask, feeling like maybe I was going to be on like an episode of Shark Tank. What numbers is he going to ask for?
I want a royalty deal next. That's what I learned from Shark Tank. That's the only thing to get.
That's the only one to get. The numbers are always a little interesting for me. I mean, gross margin, we don't subcontract out a lot. That's the thing is we own a lot of our equipment, and that's kind of a model that we've stuck to. There are a lot of companies that will start to source products from other companies and kind of just work in those margins. I found that for our company to succeed in the niche we're in, we are very protective of our brand and the quality of the equipment we put out there. So our gross margins are very high. We only subcontract out maybe I would say less than, maybe 5 to 10% of our revenue is subcontracted, equipment or rentals like that. And then with labor, I would agree. Yes, we're right about that, 50 to 60% gross margin after labor.
So like a 2.
Yeah.
And then you've got the expense of the equipment, right? So how do you think about that? Is it like a percentage of revenue? Is it?
I think to this point, and this is what's kind of interesting and what I wanted to talk to you about is up until here, it's been a lot of, intuition and just kind of my willingness to take risks on buying pieces of equipment. And I think one of the best ways to frame it is a quote that I think I heard you say, something, I might butcher this, but borrowing is like pulling your future into the present. You just better hope it's a future you want, something like that. And that resonated with me because that's what I've done to finance a decent amount of our equipment is, I've borrowed or I've done equipment financing. I would say that was a little bit risky, but I wanted to grow quickly right after the pandemic. And I saw a lot of opportunities to acquire equipment and be able to grow quickly. So to answer your question, I think I'm coming into a phase in the business where I'm working through that debt. And it's not, something that's enough to take us down, but it's a significant amount. We took I think we leveraged ourselves quite a bit in that way. But once we get on the other side of that, I do need to start thinking about what is that number? What is that metric that I'm looking at, or rule of thumb of, okay, how much am I going to reinvest in the business every year? How much of this profit are we going to take and reinvest in new capital?
So a couple of questions about that. So one is there, like when you buy this stuff, is there a ready market for its resale, or is it pretty tough to resell?
It's so niche sometimes that if you have knowledge of what your customers want or what they're looking for, you can look at something. I'll give you a great example. Giant games have been really popular for the last 5, 6, 7 years. It started with things like Giant Connect 4, Giant Jenga, and you've probably seen these at events. So then you start to think, well, what else can we make giant? Or what else can we buy that is giant? And a lot of it has to do with just novelty. It looks cool, or wow, I've never seen that before. So I may seek out a piece of equipment, or I may come across something that somebody has created, designed, manufactured that is in that category of giant games. And, I'll probably go ahead and purchase it. And then I start to push it more and I kind of create the market for it. That's not always the case, but for a lot of these items, you kind of have to create a market for it. There's really or you have to at least, give that, you make your customers aware of it, and then it becomes popular and they get it for their events. So it's hard to there's not a ton of other businesses out in the market doing it. You could look at another company and say, clearly they're doing well with, X. I think I'm going to get one of those games. But a lot of times it's our experience.
Like what's one of the most popular giant things?
For many years, it was the giant Light Bright. You remember the Light Bright toy? So we have a giant version of it.
Okay. So you got a giant Light Bright and you decide I'm out of this business, whatever. Can you resell that? Or are you like kind of stuck with that? I mean, it's like, or is it like nominal what you can get?
Yeah, you can. It depends, but mostly it's nominal. Unfortunately, a lot of these resale value for a lot of these items, it depends. Something like an obscure game like that, maybe not so much, but skee ball lanes, classic game, there'll always be a market for those.
So there's a core, and then like I assume like the depreciation schedules of these things are all over the map, right? Like,
yeah, I think in the I have to ask somewhere in the kind of like 3 to 5 years, probably take advantage of a lot of that year one depreciation. But
so if you were talking about how much capital, like how much of that equipment do you think you have to run a $1.5 million business? Like what's the capital investment? Is it a couple $100K?
That's a fantastic question, because if I were to do it all over, I bet I could do this business and eliminate at least $100,000 worth of equipment that I probably don't need. And it's funny, it makes me think of deployed capital. I would say anywhere in that $250,000 to $500,000 worth of.
So basically, if that's on a 5-year depreciation schedule, right? Then you're talking like 50 to $100K a year, depending on how big you get, right? But you're looking at 50 to 100K a year that's depreciating that you would theoretically need to like reinvest in as stuff falls apart and it's no longer usable, right? So that might be like a little metric to look at is like, so that would come in at the high end, that might come in at 8-9% of revenue, maybe down to like 5% of revenue. You got to like reinvest to keep the machines viable. And maybe you have to do it at one time. But it sounds like you're kind of buying games as you go too, right? As things get popular and you want to be competitive.
That sounds about right. Based on what I've done and based on what I've seen, there's a core group of us across the country, and we'll kind of each year we talk about what we're buying. And I would say for our size business, that sounds about right. I see businesses my size doing anywhere from, and it's throughout the course of the year, obtaining new equipment, somewhere in that $50,000 to $100,000 in reinvestment each year. That sounds about right, actually.
Yeah, so 5 to 10. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's a good benchmark. And then the margins, I assume do you come out at like 15% net, something like that?
I think it's higher than that. The margins in this business at this size are pretty good. And I still play such a crucial role in the business. I'm still very involved. And I think that has, I still, work in the business quite a bit. That's changing now, but closer, 25 to 30%.
It's a nice little business, right? And you're paying yourself a market wage at this point, do you think, essentially?
Actually, yeah. And that's something I'm pretty proud of as a small business owner. It took many years to, and I think other small business owners can relate. It's very easy to just kind of live through that bank account on distributions and take a really small salary. I try and take a very reasonable market wage. Actually, more even for all the positions I hold in the business.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good. I like hearing that. All right. So we got kind of a financial picture. Now, what about like on the marketing side? Is this like a Google ad, or is this like you have to have like good Google ratings kind of business, or what? How do you acquire a customer?
In the beginning, between when we were small, all the way up to about 500,000, all the way up to 1 million or so, very much referral relationship based. We're more B2B than people might assume. We work with a lot of event planners, event planning companies, but yes, venues. So a lot of relationship building, a lot of referral based business. And then I started to see that we were kind of maxing out on that. And I was a little late to the SEO game, but I hired a company to begin optimizing our position on our Google page position, get on that first page, get to the top. That took a few years. Actually started that right after the pandemic. So that was good timing. And then we just recently started, Google Ads. It's a great one. You just want to get into that top sponsor position because people are doing quick, simple searches of arcade game rentals in Maryland. And these days, those sponsored ads, whereas people used to look at them and skip past them, now people are even more strapped for time. They understand that they're typically reputable companies, so they'll click right on those sponsored ads. So we're doing Google Ads and now starting to do Facebook and Instagram advertising as well. So that's our next stage in marketing. I've done a lot of things in marketing that I thought were a big waste of money, big promotional events or
the dark art.
Right now, it's not a sure thing, but the beautiful thing about Google Ads and similar ones are very measurable ROI because I can see the ones that convert, that come through our website and convert. So that's what I'm leaning into right now, and honestly want to see how far that gets us in this market. I want to see how much, what haven't we tapped yet in this market.
My thing is if it's converting, just keep doing it, right? So I can hear the pain of a business owner who's wasting money on stupid brand building stuff for business, right? So like I've done a bunch of that myself, thanks.
So sometimes it's just keep it simple, stupid.
So interesting. So I like that. It's a nice little business, good margins. There's, it sounds like a pretty regular, particularly with B2B, that feels nice because it's like, I don't know, they're not really incentivized to take a chunk out of you, right? I mean, it's probably a small expense from them or...
We actually didn't touch on that. That's actually something that this industry is traditionally one where you will provide, wholesale discounts or event planners might take a commission. And as we've grown, we've tried to continue to incorporate that in the business as a cost, but I always want things to be scalable. And we're trying to make that a little bit more scalable, make it based more on not so much folks that have been grandfathered into the system so much as, hey, how much business are you actually sending us every year? And that will determine the type of discount structure you'll get.
Of course. Makes a lot of sense. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about scaling something like this. So, like, what's your role at this point? Are you still going out and doing the bar mitzvahs and that kind of stuff?
Right now, and in the last year and a half, we implemented EOS, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and a lot of folks will be.
Fantastic. We run it too.
At this point, I've been able to step almost completely out of the operations box, the operations role. I would say that's been more so in the last 6 months. I still participate by doing events, but at that point, I'm technically I'm just like any other project manager working on an event. I'm pitching in where I can. But I've been able to remove myself from there. I fill the role of right now marketing and sales, head of marketing and sales, head of finance. So those are the two areas where I spend a lot of my time right now. We've got some great systems in place in operations where that's running very smoothly. And then, of course, just at the top, kind of that visionary position as well.
I love it. Well, like my number one thing now is people around your size. Is the owner's the best salesperson, really the only person who can sell, and almost everything else can get done by other people. Although operating, I guess, like games at a party isn't like the worst job in the world, I guess, to do on a Saturday night, right?
No. And, when I've got to step in and help at events, I'm happy to do that. It keeps me in touch with things. But I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able, because it's very difficult for any business owner to do, not to completely, but to remove yourself from operations to the degree where you can actually work on it as opposed to in it. That's been great for us. And to your point, real quick, about the sales, because I've heard you say that before, and I did recently hire a sales representative, but maintaining that, I think business owners do need to remember you can't advocate that one you can't just fully delegate that at this point in the size we're at. So I'm very aware of that.
And I fully agree that you can start building teams to support your sales, like, doing relationship management, and they're maybe covering some of the accounts that aren't the biggest accounts and blah, blah, blah. That's great. It's not like I think the owner has to do every single thing. I'm just saying that, like, if you were going to look through the business and you said to me, hey, what should Nick be doing over anything else in the business? I'd say sales, right? Like even finance, you can kind of outsource, but it's great you've learned about it, but you don't need to be there to like get AR and AP to.
I can't wait till I can find someone to take over finance. Let me tell you, Alan, that is a box that's not my forte. If I could spend all my time outside of that box, I'd be super happy.
So let's talk about how you scale this. All right. So like, it feels like a very local business, right? So I guess the question is this the kind of thing where you just keep pumping money into the local market and grow that way? Do you hop to other markets? Do you acquire people in your market? Like, what do you think is the available paths?
So I have my thoughts, and then I'm also looking for input on that topic exactly. We don't feel like we've completely tapped the DMV market. This is an interesting market. It's thriving all the time, but there are other viable markets close by. So Philadelphia is an area that we're looking at. We already do events in these Philadelphia, Richmond. We've gone up and down the East Coast, but obviously there's a cost to that. So the closer markets like Philly, we have started to look at establishing a foothold in that market. But I'm very unsure of how do you scale this into a new market? Do we just kind of grow from home base, or do we open up another location? Or do we look at, acquiring another business?
So I guess my question would be, are there any like 10, 20, $30 million versions of your company out there?
I would say no. I'd say most of them, the largest ones I've seen, and they typically do more than just games, might be in that 5 to 8 range.
So where do they go after games?
So furniture is a big one because you can import a ton of furniture from China.
It's about to get more expensive there.
Yeah. And at some point, the market has been flooded with cheap furniture rentals at events. You even see all this happening in the consumer markets with fast furniture and things like that. But the other options are, there's a lot of directions you can go, but one of the easiest ones is furniture. Some people might go in the, tents, tables, and chairs. But one of the things that's been so great about this business is the lack of competitors or the lack of competition. So we really, we can get a lot of traction in any market just because there aren't a lot of competitors.
Don't go on any podcasts next.
There's something exciting about some competition. I would say it would eliminate some complacency.
Well, so I hear that with the tents, tables, chairs, furniture. That doesn't feel great to me because those are real commodity items. Unless there's something different about them. I mean, I guess like that's a strategy of like, I'm focused on the B2B buyer and I'm just going to be a service provider for them. And so I'm going to build that relationship. There's a logic there, but it does feel like you're taking a bunch of commoditized crap that you can get from anyone and combining it with what's potentially if people come and the chair is 20% better than another chair, I don't think they write back to the venue and go, that was amazing. I can't wait to do something with you again. If the games are 20% better, they're psyched, right? So that feels like you're more in that business than you're in the entertainment business, not in the furniture rental business. So it does feel like that. I get the logic of going there. It doesn't feel like, and then I guess the question would be, is the B2B buyer that stressed about finding all that from one person? Is that like a huge time savings for that person at like the Gaylord or wherever, or at a venue?
Not as much anymore. I think the ease with which people can, find these things on the internet, they're looking for sometimes the best provider in each category. And, for us being the best provider in the games category helps us, really differentiates us from the competition. So to your point, there's something to be said for continuing to lean into a product that's just really niche and making sure that of the small amount of suppliers, if you had a short list of people you could choose from, and you could be the best person on that short list, I mean, I feel like your chances of gaining that business are pretty high. I mean, if there's 100 providers in an area, even if you're the best, I mean, good luck getting to the top of that list anyways. It's going to come down to a lot of other factors, price probably being the most important one.
Yeah, I think you're in a price shootout in that world. So unless you're doing something just like it's a special kind of tent that no one else, blah, 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 or something. But
So for us, it's the barrier to entry is not too high, but this is definitely a difficult business to be in. So
here's my question. All right, so other things that I would probe around on this are if you had $50 million in business across 30 cities, could you buy the equipment a lot cheaper? Like the games? Could you get access to games that other people didn't get access to? That would be a roll-up franchise strategy. Because you can do this central, if you can get mass in the center, then you can make yourself cheaper or more competitive than all the other alternatives out there.
I think that's one direction to take this. And I've been thinking of it in that way is, little franchises in different cities or different markets and find the best 10 items that perform in your market and plant those there. And yeah, use your connections with distributors. I mean, if we went to a distributor and said, or we could go directly to a manufacturer, probably apply as a distributor and say, hey, listen, we're going to buy 100 units of this or whatever it is. We'd absolutely get some pricing advantage there.
Yeah, because I was talking to somebody, I went to a conference several weeks ago, this company, Permanent Equity, they're a big PE firm. And she was talking about swimming pools are a terrible, construction. That's a terrible roll-up kind of opportunity because they already, the industry, they get together and they do joint purchasing already. And almost everything they do is local, like the permitting, the design, there are all these local regulations. So there's very little that you can centralize. And so that became now my view on this is you've got to be able to increase that kind of efficiency through centralization or a combination of combining purchasing. There's not going to be a bunch of regulations about how you play Miss Pac-Man in New York versus Miami, right? So this does feel like there's a couple of those elements there. Now, when we first started talking about this, the first thing that I thought of was franchise, because it feels like they're good margins. It's a cool job. It's not that hard. If you can document the process of first of all, you get them the games, you're renting those, right? So you're getting that revenue stream and that you take care of that for them. But then you're giving them the playbook of how to run it and how to go reach out to all these who are the B2B providers? How do you approach them? What are the contracts with them? Blah, blah, blah. That feels like there's something there. And then, but when I think about buying them, I'm oh man, what are you buying? There's a person who's doing it. Yeah, well, yeah, you're buying the assets, I guess. But as you said, some of them are worth something, some of them are worth nothing. But really what it is this person who knows the people at the venues. So if the owner has all those relationships and you buy it out and the owner is not there anymore, I don't know how much you really bought.
I got to tell you, I've thought about the angle of looking at buying other businesses in different markets. Really, I think what you're buying are the assets. 9.9 times out of 10, you're just buying the assets. Typically, the businesses like this won't have any systems in place or sales funnels or anything like that. I think to your point, I think it would be better to basically just go into another market and, plant a flag there and then make that the franchise model or something like that, and then see if it grows from there.
Yeah, if you could do it in 2 or 3 markets, you build it out yourself in 3, 4 markets, and then you're all right, I built the playbook. If you can get people situated, maybe, these could be corporate owned, you could hire someone, then you get really the playbook down, then you can do it.
And I think to that point, the reason that I'm attracted to that franchise model of scaling this type of business is this is such an asset-heavy business. And to own all of that equipment, all of those assets, I think it would be a lot better to refine the process, refine the model in our home base. And yeah, like you said, maybe 2 to 3 corporate-owned entities around the country, and then franchise it out to where the franchisees are owning the equipment or leasing the equipment. Another way for us to set up, equipment leasing there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think in the beginning, I've seen, and I think you would agree with this, some businesses jump into franchising far too quickly. But it seems like from talking to you and a lot of people, this seems to be the one potential way to scale this type of business significantly higher than anybody else has.
Yeah, I'd actually be curious. I had this guy, Brian Beers, on who writes a big column on franchising. He's more like, how do you buy franchises, like become a franchisee? There's a guy, Wolf of Franchises, who writes about different franchise concepts. And actually, I want to get this guy on who does popsicle franchising. Like, there'd be some learnings there for you. So he was in a group that I was doing some stuff around X or Twitter on. So yeah, like I agree. Most people don't have that much and they go try to franchise. It doesn't work out. I think if you're able to prove the model, really, really like get it operating in a few locations, then it feels like that's the right expansion strategy to me. But again, I'm not a franchising expert. So like I would want to go talk to those guys, people that have done franchises before, and like what are those rules of thumb that you've got to have to be able to build it?
It seems like there's kind of an upper limit in every market to what a business like this can scale to. We just talked about without having to venture in it becoming a one-stop shop, which again, I've seen, we just discussed this, becoming the one-stop shop for, your customers, that can go south pretty quickly. So staying very focused in niche and expanding into other markets, it sounds like the way to scale this business is always going to be scaling into these new markets. And you're only going to tap out at probably somewhere between $1 to $3 million in, depending on how much equipment you acquire, how many trucks you have running. But each market, but that again is a very, for, an owner operator, it can be, right now, that's what my business is. It's a lifestyle business. And for an owner operator, it can be a really great business.
What I'd be really interested in to see, like if you went into like a Philadelphia or somewhere in Baltimore, I don't know if it's as big, but if you can like really document the process you take to go meet all the B2B people you need to meet and like what you do with them and how you pitch them and like what the deal is and why they hired you. If there's like a playbook that would actually be replicable for that, then you add on, the lease, like maybe you're seeming me to make sense that you get capital cheaper as a bigger company. Like if you're a franchise if you were the company, you get capital cheaper instead of everyone going out and getting their loans for their equipment. You just lease it to them. It seems like that's like a pretty interesting business.
I think that's the angle to take. And we're in the beginning stages. And this is, we're talking about, now that we've cracked that, I always like to think, I've heard people say, when you get over a certain size in your business, you own your job, right? Congrats, you own your job. But now we're in the position where we can start thinking about those things. And we have, it starts internally. It's what are our internal processes and systems that allow us to operate efficiently and consistently. And these are the conversations I like to have that are planting the seed for 1 to 3 years from now is, okay, what's our sales playbook look like? What's our marketing playbook? Not just for our internal uses, but thinking about how would this work if I, handed this off to somebody else in the Philly market and said, okay, here you go, run with it.
And my thing also is if you had like 30 of these things or something, then you can probably develop your own stuff, your own games.
That's an exciting thing. Yeah.
Because like to me, that's another angle on this industry, but like it's a totally different business than the one you're running and you don't have distribution, right?
It's funny that you mentioned that because this industry, we're a luxury item, right? You're going to add us to, when you get to the bottom of your budget at your event, you've got food, you've got your photographer, you got your DJ or your band. We might be at the bottom, but when you got money left over, you're spending it on us. And we can kind of dictate what's popular, which games are going to be trending at events. And so to your point, something exciting is I've always wanted to manufacture games or to create new games, but you don't have the market to sell them. But if we had all of our own locations, we could come up with a new game and say, you know what, it makes sense for us to manufacture 50 of these. And now look at that. Now our expenditures are much lower on these new assets.
Yep, exactly. That's my thought. And, that creates another source of value too. And I agree, like doing it now, that would be the other thing I would think of immediately and then say, well, no, I don't have distribution. I don't know how to do that. It would be a big distraction for you right now. But down the road, that would make a lot of sense.
I think that's the other thing for small business owners in my position right now. Like I said, I'd like to say we're at about 1.5 this year, and it's very easy to. Of course, there's that shiny object. You got to eliminate that. You got to stop chasing the shiny object, and we've gotten more focused in that way. But it feels very much right now. There's a lot of plates spinning, and I like to think of it as from good to great. Those flywheels, right? So you get the one flywheel spinning, and you kind of give attention to that one and then you're moving over to the next one. So this position that it's putting on a lot of different hats. And that's just kind of for what it's worth for anybody that's going through that right now. I feel your pain.
Well, and it's really, I'm going to be really interested to see where you go because I think you're about to enter this phase, right, where you're a little bit away from it, but where Greg Crabtree talks about the black hole business getting up, above 2 million into the $3 million range. That's where you're really starting to add management outside of you, and you're spending a lot on salaries. And if that investment doesn't pay off, you're losing money. You got to fire them, start over, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's one thing that happens there. The other thing that I've been increasingly seeing in working with businesses going through that process is that it's after about 2 to 3 million, and it always varies a little bit, right? But it's like you have to come up with a way to sell your stuff without the owner doing it all. And so you have to, usually you're tap out your connections at 1 or 2 million or something like that. And then it's like, well, what am I going to do to scale? Just like we were talking about, how do you scale past that? So you've got to figure something out, whether that's, I've got to get into a different service line. I've got to meet different kinds of people. I've got to go to different cities and franchise, blah, 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 whatever the answer is. There's 1,000 answers. But you got to kind of figure out that model, and that model then determines what you're really investing in that black hole. What are you trying to get right there? Are you trying to get the right kind of sales program, sales support? Are you trying to get the right kind of operational efficiency? Whatever it is, that'll be the question coming up for background.
That's the part I'm excited for. I think that's why I wanted to talk to you. I feel like we've entered a phase where it's hard to articulate it. You did pretty well there. It's a new learning phase as a business owner. As business owners, you're always learning. And I think the exciting thing about being a business owner is during different evolutions of this journey, you have to become not an expert, but you have to become kind of a different person. You have to focus on new things you didn't even know you were going to have to focus on. And that's what keeps us exciting. So I feel like this is that new phase right on the cusp of getting what you said, that kind of black hole of business. And there's a lot of risk here too, because these decisions are they are much more expensive decisions. They're set, whether it's, we're talking about salaries or investments we're making, or overhead just becomes larger and larger, warehouse space becomes larger. So it's just a new level of, I say risk, but with risk comes excitement, and an ability to learn and grow.
Yeah. I was starting to think about, just as you're talking about this thing, like Philly, right? Or Richmond, but Philadelphia is obviously probably the next largest city up the coast. And I could see that feels like, hey, that's where you should go, is go to Baltimore, Richmond, they're good. And I wouldn't say no, but they're just not going to have the volume, right? I mean, and it's a question of
I've done a little research, and it's mostly just surveying other companies in the area that service other markets as well. Philly is surprisingly a much larger event market than people probably know. I've talked to a few companies that say they're doing more business in Philly than they are even locally. So we've got our eyes on Philly to the extent that I've got my, the SEO company working on, getting us some traction in that market. But the question then becomes, and this is for a discussion for another day, is do we keep transporting? At what point do you kind of say,
exactly what I was going to bring up?
when do I make that decision to really, plant a flag there?
Are you hiring someone there? Are you moving equipment up there with a warehouse? Are you driving back and forth on 95 like a hellscape? That is, right?
Currently, that's what we do.
Right. But you've got this great little profitable lifestyle business. And it's do you want to make your life miserable going to Philly all the time? And if you don't go and drive the stuff back and forth, then what? I got to invest a bunch of capital. How long is that going to take me to? So I 100% feel you're at that point where it's what? It's up to you, right? It's not, there's no right answer because you got a good business.
It's very hard to measure. A lot of that decision is just based on as a business owner, your willingness to endure some new suffering, because any growth, any change like that is going to invite some sort of suffering into your life. And you go, okay, like you said, I got a good thing going here, but I've learned a little bit more about who I am on this journey. And one of the things I'm attracted to is the growth. And I don't think I'm going to be able to stop that. So if it's not this business, it'll be another one.
I think you got a good business here, man.
It is. And now the question is, how scalable is this thing? And we've only expanded in one market. And I got to be honest, there are not a lot of businesses like mine that have expanded into multiple markets. Truly. So
I just wonder, if you did the math on how many machine lab, there's some period of time like you're doing now where you're just testing demand, you're going up there, you're going to have to take it, right? And maybe you only go after the weekday business because it's easier to do it then or something. But like, I don't know, how much does it cost to have somebody who can do the talks with the B2, or, can run the office there? I don't know what that involves, whether that is actually going out and talking to these people. Can you do that on the phone? Do you need to be there?
I think there's so much of that could probably be done remotely. The question then becomes, at what point do you put in the cart before the horse sometimes? Because I think operationally, it's important to be ready for some amount of demand. I think you can build up the demand here locally. We could, have an office in Philly. Sorry, I put that in quotes for the listeners, like everyone does. And you could have a Philly phone number and a Philly website, and that all redirects here to home base. At what point? Because I'll tell you what, as a business owner, there is some level of, when you leverage yourself a little bit and you remove the safety net and you give yourself, when you, as they say, kind of burn the ships, sink or swim. Sorry, I could go on and on. That drives me to succeed. And I think that there's some level of expanding into these new markets. You got to hustle. And so I think, but as I've grown as an owner, sometimes you have to kind of temper that desire to leap and say, okay, so you got to calculate, a little bit more calculated. So what we're doing to that extent is I'm not just running out and renting warehouse space and, parking some equipment in Philly. Can we get a foothold there first? And we'll go ahead and transport stuff up there. And then the question then becomes, what is that number that says, hey, we're bringing, we're doing enough in Philly that we feel like if we actually get a little bit of space and we park some equipment up there and we heavily push this equipment in this market, how long will it take us for this to be a self-sustaining entity?
So to me, this is like what you need to document this, right? So you need to very carefully document, it took us this amount of effort and time, this amount of money to like do this, and then we can produce this return within X period of time, given, and also you're going to have to talk about the market, right? I mean, entering Philly, spending $150K to enter Philly is a lot different than spending $150K to enter Richmond, right? That probably wouldn't make any sense. So it's got to be a big enough market. But I mean, if you could say like, we do this to test demand, we set up a website, we start the marketing, and then at this point we hire this person and they do this, and then we have to buy this amount of machines and we only go to this amount when we hit this milestone. I mean, you start really creating an investable business, right? So even like investors like me would be interested in that. But then that leads you to your franchise concept, right? That's an investment.
This is the part I know I will now be playing on repeat again to write down notes. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, because that's exactly right. Those are the simple steps of what we need to do. And you know what? Regardless if we went that franchise route, those are the steps we need to take just to get into these new markets. What does it take to get into Philly? Do we want to use that to test the waters in Columbus, or name some other market or Richmond, or even Chicago, as far as Chicago, whatever.
I mean, it feels to me like if you can buy. So you do all this.
Well, let's say, so this is what I would do. You do let's say you prep a bunch of the market. I guess I'd go, for operation, I'd say, okay, let me find 500 square feet. Let me put a van or a truck up there and let me fill that truck with it. Or forget that, just fill the truck with all the equipment and let that be the storage. That would be my first step in a new market. Let me find the 5 best pieces that I can push out enough just to get that operation running up there. Don't even rent space, store everything in a truck, right? That would be how I'd probably enter the market in a really small way at first.
And then you have a 1099 or something that could like take them over. Yeah. So my thing would be like, that's going to cost you what? I mean, if you impute the cost of the equipment, which you might already have, but say it's $50K or something like that.
If I leased a truck, even so that I don't have to commit that much, let's say, I could lease a truck for, I don't know, it's like 3 years or something like that. You lease a truck, I could split off some equipment from my current business. And to me, that's the compromise of transporting everything or completely establishing another business there. That's the compromise.
Yeah. And I mean, my question on that would be like, is that half-assing it? And if you half-ass it, can you get a demand signal? And if true, then that's great. Then you can say, all right, well, as long as I can make this in this amount of time, then I can expand it, and I'm going to take the risk on hiring the person or putting 15 pieces of equipment and getting maybe not a warehouse yet, but you're just getting a short-term thing or some blah, blah, blah.
I think the important thing to do would be, for me to try and do something that I don't normally do would again, to be, look at the numbers very closely and say, okay, how long did it take us to break even on this half-ass model of entering the market? Could we have done better if we had?
Just be careful of that model, though, because you could be going up and testing demand in a way that's so half-assed that it's not even worth testing. right? It's like I can't really I couldn't actually staff an event at the Four Seasons because I only had 3 pieces of equipment. So like I'm actually not testing the demand, right? So that kind of thing, what I'd watch for. So, but I think they're wins.
But this whole discussion is exciting because this is exactly what I'd like to do. This is and there's so many ways to kind of, okay, we could do it this way. We could, like we're saying, kind of half-ass and say, oh, we're going to just dip our toes in, or you could go all in.
And you have a model from 0 to 1.5 million now. So you already have one model. So let's write that out, right? And say, what did that take? What did it do? What did we, blah, blah, blah. And then you just follow the same thing.
Right. I think that's the starting point. And then finding what got us from 0 to 500,000 and how do we start that in the next market?
All right. How long till you get the spreadsheet together? We can review it. So I'm in. I want to do it. I get excited about every business, No, I love it. I think there's something there. And I think what you're saying with the lack of competition, and you have this demonstrated. Plus, the other thing is Philly. It's like, it's got all the things. It's got significant Jewish population. So you got the bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. It's got events, just like DC, got the historic stuff. So feels good. That's awesome. So Nick, let's talk a little bit about that.
I was just saying that'll be our next discussion. When we come back, it'll be, where are we at on on opening in Philly?
I think we're going to have to stick to the coast for the Jews though, because the middle of the country is not going to be so great for that. I don't think, but you won't get the bar mitzvahs.
No, it's here. It's New York, Philly, a little bit of LA.
Let's hit Miami, baby.
Miami. Yeah, a little bit. Yep. I mean, those are really pretty saturated markets too. You notice we didn't bring up New York at all because it's just an extremely saturated market. So I don't even have an interest in New York at this time.
Yeah. And that'd be an interesting thing is like, what is the profile of the city that you need? And like, and I made a joke about the Jewish part because of the bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, but I bet there's some other thing in like Cleveland, right? That's different than what we do.
LA would be Sweet 16s and somewhere it's quinceañeras and
that'll be really interesting now. So let's go back and talk a little bit. So obviously you mentioned the pandemic and we were working together through our group entrepreneurially at the time. I mean, you guys went to like basically 0, right? Like almost overnight.
What a devastating thing for, anybody in hospitality, anybody who experienced it. It was, and not more so for us. There were some things that helped us survive. One of them is we were so small that our overhead was low enough that
You were still well under $1 million before, right? So
well under $1 million. Yeah, probably do it. Probably in 2019, we did about 750,000. So overhead was low enough that we could trim it. And I only had one full-time person at the time. So, we took advantage of, all the programs that, PPP loans, ERTC. I did have to take out an SBA EIDL loan. And, I kind of, for me personally, I capped it at what, I wouldn't have to personally guarantee. So, we took out 200,000 so that I wouldn't have to personally guarantee it. I wasn't willing to take that risk for this business. So at the beginning of 2021, I was actually consulting with some folks. It was having some tough conversations about, okay, we're going to shut this thing down. What are the steps we need to take? And at that time, I started trimming even more from the business as much as I could. And about 4 months into 2021 is when the vaccines were released. And it's like the light switch just turned back on. It was wild.
I remember talking to you around that time and you were like, we were sitting there like, as soon as this turns back on, man, people are going to be desperate for this kind of stuff, right?
They were in a big way. 2021 was a lot of up and down. We had a couple of variants that came out that caused some temporary scares, but you could tell that the public was just ready to get back to partying. And there was nothing we could do with virtual events either. We could have completely pivoted and done some things in the virtual space, but everything we do is hands-on. We bring fun to your event, these big arcade games. So virtual events, to what degree they're still around, I don't know. People wanted to go back to in-person events, and 2021 was a bit up and down. 2022, you wouldn't believe, people were they were amazed at how much business they were bringing in. And it was exciting and, just felt like breathing new air into the business. There was a point during the pandemic where I seriously considered is this what I want to do? Should I pursue other opportunities? And I did look into that. But when I came back into this, it really reaffirmed my love for the events industry. There's something I really enjoy about this too. So we got through that. But, the scars are that's part of the debt that we're getting out from under, that EIDL loan. And that really stinks. People love to say, oh, it's great. It's low interest. It's over 30 years. But at the end of the day, it's a big obligation hanging over your head. So, we got through it.
What else do you think you take away from it? Like other insights that you got?
So I guess, okay, one takeaway is this. I now have my scar of, there were a lot of business owners that said, well, we survived the housing crash. I wasn't in business during that. And you felt like, because again, we're a luxury, right? And we're the first that gets cut out. A lot of corporate travel was cut out after the housing market crash in '08. And so I never had, I couldn't sit there and talk about my war story of business. And so now I got through one. So I've got that. You just get tougher. You learn some things about the side of the business you don't want to have to think about. I learned things about what would happen if I had to declare bankruptcy. It's not the end of the world. When you get that close to failure, you say, hey, let me tell you some of the things I did during the pandemic. First thing I did was I reached out to a friend. The very first thing I did was I reached out to a friend that had a junk removal business. You may know him as well from Entrepreneurially. And I subcontracted for him. I took my truck and I went and removed junk from people's houses to pay the bills, right? So I worked for UPS. I just took my pickup truck and delivered packages for UPS. And it's very hard for business owners to stop being, or say entrepreneurs to stop being entrepreneurs.
I love it. You were like hustling, man. You were out there like getting jobs, like.
Yeah. So there were others too. My wife and I started a retail flower business during the pandemic. We did close that down because I could not run multiple businesses at the same time. I'm not that good. But yeah, we hustled, we sought new opportunities, and one of our core values is never give up. One of our core values is never give up. And that truly is something that, I try and embody throughout everything. And I feel like that's one of the things that did get me through the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I remember hearing you talk about kind of being in that entertainment industry and how passionate you were about it. I was like, I knew it. If that pandemic ended, basically you were going to win on the other side. So it's a huge accomplishment, man. Like, congrats.
Well, thank you. And it was, I did have a discussion with you at that time. And I remember you saying something to the effect of what a lot of entrepreneurs will say is, I don't know if I could ever go back to working for someone, or I don't know if I could ever go back to just being a W-2. And honestly, Alan, I think I was at a gas station when I was talking about that, because I just remember where I was and just saying, that's me too. And it was those discussions that kind of helped get me through it. And people that, knew that this was still something I wanted to pursue. And we just had to get to the other side of this thing, and we did.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment. A lot of times they say, like, listened to something the other day where they said, it was this guy, Med Faber, who has a ETF company called Cambria. And he was like, sometimes just surviving is the accomplishment. And I think a lot of times in business, it's like, you just survive to fight another day. That's good. And then you can build from there. So, I mean, to me, it's a huge testament to the power of entrepreneurship and just like why business people like you are just different, right? It's just like, you have to do it. And it's like you're saying about growing the business. It's like, I got a great lifestyle business, but I'm still going to go do all this stuff. Even after you went through all that, you're still going to do it because you're an entrepreneur. That's what you do.
Yeah, you feel compelled. And it's funny when people come into this, this lifestyle or being an entrepreneur, you didn't even know sometimes that you were this person until you do it and you go, oh, this is what I was supposed to be doing all along. So it's nice when you finally find it.
That's what I mean, man. I feel the exact same way. I wish I had just found it like 10 years before I did, but thank God I found it when I did. Well, Nick, this has been awesome. I've taken an hour of your time now, so we've gone a little over, but I really appreciate it. And man, love to hear how it's going and the next moves you're making. And I'm sure everybody else is as well too. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I can't wait to come back and talk to you about our Philly location.
All right, let's do it. We'll go to an Eagles game and then we can go to your location.
Sounds good.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pence. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apence on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.